During my time studying constellations, I looked for an audio way to learn more about this approach with little success. So I made it my mission to reach out to very well-known facilitators and gather their answers from years of experience for some of the most popular topics like relationships, money, illness, career, and more. My hope from these conversations is to shine a light into the dynamics that often play in our lives that impact us greatly, but we often overlook. My name is Macarena Ferreira. Welcome to the Family Constellations podcast. So, welcome. This is the first episode ever. So, we'll see how we go. But I'm so excited to have you. Thank you for saying yes to this. For those that don't know you, Tiziano is an amazing facilitator. He's been doing this for like 6 years. We met last year at the Family Intensive Constellations. And since then, I have been working with you and just seeing the massive amount of people that you touch, that you help through their healing, through their evolution, through their growth. So I'm so excited to have you as our first guest for this podcast. So welcome, Tiziano.
Thank you, Mac, for having me. You know how much I love my work. It's my life purpose. And also I'm grateful to be part of this project.
Amazing.
From you. And yeah.
Can you please tell us, for those that don't know you, a little bit of how you got started with Family Constellations and why do you love this work so much?
I got started because I've gone through a lot of upside down in my life, like a lot of extreme experience, particularly in my upbringing, from childhood going up into my teenage years, and then eventually when I moved to Australia as well. So the reason why I started constellation, I started to dive into constellation. It's because I was going through a time in my business, which was a hard time. I was in deep financial debt, as you know the story. So I've gone down a path of over €100,000 debt into my business. And out of some friends, they told me, like you had some crazy experience into your life, up and down, very extreme experiences. There might be something that it's not yours in those experiences that you carry from your system of belonging. At the time, I was completely unaware of what that mean, like what do you mean from my system of belonging? So they gave me the name of Bert Hellinger. They gave me a few names of systemic facilitator. In 2016, not many people were doing it. I mean, they were still not as today is that popular, but eventually now it's much more to the surface. At the time, there were absolutely not many speaking about it. Hellinger was still alive at the time, so I went straight into his website, see what he was doing, and it resonated immediately. I searched for some facilitator in order for me to do some work into that. I eventually found it. And after that experience, my life shifted 360. Like I released so much tears, so much sadness, so much anger that day when I did my first constellation. And I immediately fall in love into that. And I'm extremely passionate and driven when I feel something really calling me. So I immediately started to buy books from him and stuff. So I searched inside it. And eventually it took me years to really understand it, to really like get into it to the level that I am today. I've done a lot of work with that, and particularly the person who has inspired me the most and I followed the most and I found it as my mentor, I would say, is Gabriele Policardo, which is an Italian facilitator. He studied directly from Hellinger and I followed him since day one. And yeah, then now it's my biggest life purpose and passion, and I'm all call for it. Like I live for this. I know this is my gift and it's my giving to the world. And I know in a very soon time, I will make a worldwide impact with that.
Amazing. So the friends that introduced you to this kind of work, they were from Italy or they were here in Australia?
They were here in Australia, but they were Italian. They were already eventually to spiritual experiences, into some sort of self-development. Because I like to be, I like things when they make sense, Mac. Like I like things that need to resonate with me, like I am a believer in everything. I like every sort of work, from the science to the medicine to the spiritual, from everything. I'm happy to open to everything, but eventually I like to see the results, So because I really felt the result within me, I thought this is the most empowering form of healing that I've ever experienced. Then it was not only making sense to a personal point of view, but also from a scientific, from a logic point of view. So that really clicked me in telling me, wait, this is something that needs to be brought to the surface, needs to be spread out worldwide. People need to know about it.
Yeah, I can so relate to that, especially when you start to learn a little bit more about the dynamics and what some symptoms may relate to. And then, yeah, it's kind of like you want to jump in and be like,
yeah,
maybe you should.
Right.
Okay, so today we're going to focus mostly on love relationships because it's such a big topic. And I think a lot of people will be interested in this, whether they are single or in a relationship. So can you please tell me, why do your parents have so much to do with relationships? Why should we consider them when we are either looking for love or we are already in a relationship?
Beautiful question, and I feel we can give a lot out from this question. So first and foremost, the most important point is that the first relationship in our life is the one with our mother. So as soon as we get out of the womb, the first contact, love to love. So I'm a point of attention of love. My mother is a point of attention of love. So the first contact, eye to eye, is with my mother. So going forward, every relationship is eventually a copy of that first imprinting. In fact, we acknowledge that when people are experiencing difficulties in birth, such as cesarean, lamp, or they have what we call interrupted movements towards their mother, they reflect that into their life. So this is an interrupted movement towards their first love experience, then is driven obviously towards nurturing, towards loving affection, as well as success. Another important topic, Mac, is the point of interrupted movements. What are interrupted movements? And I feel this is probably the most important point in terms of relationship to our partners and our parents. So interrupted movements are a movement of love that cannot find fruition, that cannot find completion. What does it mean? It means that for a child, extending his arms and reaching his mother, it's the basic thing. So I seek love, I reach my mother, I extend my arms, mom, come over here, nurture me, protect me, taking care of me. So if for some reason that movement is interrupted because their mother is not there, because perhaps she's emotionally unavailable, because she needs to go to work, of course, and the child has been left at school, child care with the uncle, the auntie, or the grandmother, that is an interrupted movement. What does it mean? It means that the child dive into sadness. So there is a point where he's seeking to reach his mother, he can't reach his mother, he dive into sadness. Eventually, this sadness turn out to be anger. Why is that? Because if anger doesn't generate within the individual remains stuck into that sadness. So she cannot move forward. Eventually, anger is generated within the body as an emotional response and is telling you to the individual, hey, take an action, move forward. So anger allows us to move forward. Eventually, if that sadness was too deep, we generate another coping mechanism, which is called pride. So what does it mean? It means that from that experience of separation, we get angry, and that perhaps is then moved to our partners. So our partners is not there emotionally available for us, so we get angry about it. And how does pride play within that? So if our mother was emotionally available, when our mother comes back, we turn our back to our mother. Why is that? Because unconsciously we say, hey, you allow me to cry, to dive into sadness once, and I don't allow you to do that anymore. So we turn our back to that. And the same experience is moved to our partner. So perhaps our partner was emotionally available, something happened, we just can't relate, and we just can't find this connection, this love with our partner. So we turn our back on them. So as you can see, the relationship with our partners, particularly our mother, is the imprinting towards the coming relationship with our lover. I feel to touch a point also in that. So for men, their first love is their mother. So they reflect their lover towards their mother. Okay, so my partner reflects the behavioral traits of my mother. For you as a woman, your partner reflects the behavioral traits of your father. So of course we go in opposition. Our first love for us as men is our mother. So of course my partner will reflect my mother, and for you, your partner will reflect your father. So if perhaps your father was someone who was emotionally unavailable, or perhaps had some sort of child behavioral traits, and you've been an emotional support for your father, which sort of partner you're gonna find? A partner that you're gonna mother. Okay, so my father was emotionally available, was more of a child, I was more of an emotional support for him, so I'm going to find a partner who I will be an emotional support for him. Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I can speak for most of our listeners that we have had some sort of dynamic or problem with our parents, right? So having this in mind, what do you think a successful relationship, how can that be accomplished, considering that every person in a relationship brings like their own family conscience or their own family baggage or dynamics?
So this is an extremely important question because bring us to understand what a conscious relationship is. So in order for us to experience a successful relationship, we must experience our partner as separated from us. I explained this clearly. This is one of the order of love of Bert Hellinger. So what does it mean? If I experience my mother in my partner, I don't fully experience my partner as a self, as an individual. So I'm still experiencing my mother in my partner. So in order for me to experience my partner in full, I must first detach from my family of origin. Myself, obviously, from my mother, and you as a woman from your father, and your first experience with your mother too. So in order for an individual to do that, I have observed over the years that each individual goes through at least 3 or 4 interrupted movements. What does it mean? That instead of generating anger in that interrupted movement, we must die. We must suffer that sadness. We must cry out those how we call ancient tears. So we are able to release this attachment to our first family, our first love, and move forward fully with our partner until we don't release our first love, which it could be still attached out of guilt, out of anger, out of rage. So there could be negative emotion, evil emotion, how we call them, that they keep attached to them. Why is that? Love keep repeating them in our partner in order for us to heal it. So in order for us to actually dive into that sadness, dive into that anger, so die out in that and reconnect that point of love, which was the touch. So at the point where we actually heal, when we dive, when we cry out that sadness, we are able to release our family, to detach from our family, from our system of belonging, and create the new family. So step in full with our new partner, fun enough, the more we are in anger, the more we are in opposition to our first family, our first love, our first relationship with the one with our parents, and the more we are unable to detach. So people who are in conflict with their mother, they are extremely attached to their mother. Mm-hmm. People who are actually in harmony with their mother as well as their father, they are able to detach from them and move forward fully into their new relationship. So they will stop seeing their mother, their father into their partners.
What do you think about the persons that have like a subconscious conflict with their parents, right? Like they have gone through some sort of discord in childhood or teenage years, and then they are able to reconnect with their parents in a new, different way, but some patterns keep showing. So like in the surface, I am in friendship or in good terms with my parents, but inside there's something that doesn't sit right. How would you see that from a constellation point of view?
So this is another very important question, which will bring a lot of awareness to it. So one thing is what we think consciously, Mac, when we are as adult. One thing is what we are unconsciously from a morphogenetic point of view. So which is our imprinting, which is our code. I give you an example. When a child goes through a divorce, this is probably the most clear example for everybody. When a child goes through divorce, generally, their parents, they feel guilty towards their children, particularly their mother. You are a mother, so you know that. So when you detach from your partner, you feel some sort of guilt towards your child. What does it mean? It means that you try to give more attention, more care, more love to your child, to your son, to your daughter, because you feel guilty about the action that has just happened, what the decision you have taken. So what does it mean? It means that your children, they perceive guilt as a form of love. So they become subconsciously manipulative in their head. Subconsciously, they don't do it on purpose. They think like, oh, if my mother feels guilty, she gives me more love. So guess, Mac, which form of relationship those people they're gonna find in their adulthood? Subconsciously, they find a partner who they can make feel guilty, because subconsciously they feel, if my partner feels guilty, means that he loves me more. Mm-hmm. So they don't do it consciously, they do it subconsciously. How do we release that? We release that in a constellation, from a morphogenetic point of view, going back to the first experience, to what happened into that divorce. By bringing this to acknowledgement, we bring to understanding and to the surface which form of love we have embodied, which form of love we follow. Once we bring to the surface, we can cry out that sadness, as I said before, we can dive into that desperation. And out of that desperation, we can change it, we can harmonize. And as I always say, we can make something good.
Perfect. Amazing. Can you tell us, for the listeners that are single, what you do? You go on your first date and you sit down, you ask for your drink, and what does TC do? Do you just straight away go, what's the relationship with your mother? Or
TC will do that because it is extremely addicted to his work, so he will start to talk about constellation to everybody. That's what I do. The most important things, guys, is to be yourself. Why is to be yourself? And I have a very conscious explanation for this. Because if you're not gonna be yourself, that means that the other person is not gonna be in themselves as well. So you are reflecting some protection mechanism to one another. So in order for you to feel if you match with the other person, or if you don't match, perhaps, it is to be yourself. Because by being yourself, by opening up to your vulnerability, you allow the other person to open up to his or her vulnerability. And if they don't do so, you perceive it, generally through anxiety. People who are in front of someone who is not being themselves, or they try to be someone else, or they try to be in a certain way, they perceive something innerly straight away, which is anxiety. I've been to a lot of dates, and also with my beautiful partner now, Alice. After a while, I was like, "Hey, why are you not being yourself?" Or because I feel anxiety. What? And eventually, I allow her to open up because I open up first. Mm-hmm. So the more we're vulnerable, and the more we are able to deepen our relationship. People who are together since 40 years, 50, whatever, but they're not vulnerable to one another. They might have been together for this much amount, but their connection is this much.
Yeah.
The more we dive back into our vulnerability, and the more we are able to create bond. Why certain relationships are so difficult to break? Because they've been so vulnerable to one another. They've gone so deep that they really bond to the core. They really bond to the core. The more they allow themselves to be vulnerable, and the more they bonded. And eventually, there's a dynamic which systemically we understand. The more relationship we experience, and the less will be our bond. What does it mean? It doesn't mean that our love will be unsuccessful. Actually, our love will be more successful, but our bond will be less. Why is that? Because with our first partners, the one we have given them all, we have gone in desperation. Those what they call toxic relationship. They have the deepest bond. Why is that? Because they've gone into desperation. They allow themselves to really dive into the deepest part of their vulnerability. But going forward, they will allow this less. So the more relationship we experience, and the minor will be our bond. However, that doesn't mean that our love will be worse. Actually, quite the opposite. Our love, our relationship will be better because we have learned from the previous experience, but we'll never experience the bond that we experienced with the one with the toxic relationship or our first big love.
That is something that I notice in nowadays relationships, right? Like there are more separations, there are more divorce compared to like our parents' generation or our grandparents' generation. Is there a reason for that systemically? Like why is our younger generations like not conforming to a point in our relationships like we were in the past?
There is a very big one, and you pointing very important question out of this. The majority, Mac, the biggest reason what I've observed is out of needs. So our grandparents, they were basing our relationship out of needs, and a relationship is based out of needs. But today, you know better than me because you always come to my events and we don't work together. People constantly say, I'm independent. If you are independent, you don't need anybody. As I always say, like particularly going through women, because there's been this kind of return of this feminine energy, which is amazingly important, particularly the mother energy. So I want to speak also about that. But people who don't need anybody, they embody their masculinity as well as their feminine. They don't need a partner. So they are able to detach from their partner, and eventually they learn to embody the opposite side of their sexuality. For example, women, they embody their masculinity, and men, they embody their femininity. So they don't need anybody. Our grandparents, they needed one another. So my grandmother was taking care of the household, of the children, and my grandfather was going to work and bring the money home. So this created a deeper bond. Why is that? Because a relationship is based on needs. So I give you one, you give me one. I give you one, you give me one. But if I embody the opposite side, so if I embody my femininity, if I provide by also I look after the children, I look after the household, what do I need you for? Like it is easier for me to detach. It is much easier for me to detach. I've embodied the opposite side of my sexuality. So you are, how we call it respectfully, worthless to me. Like you don't serve me. Yeah.
Amazing. I have a question from one of our listeners as well. And she wants to know what your thoughts are on twin flames, and if that is no exist, or like how does constellation view twin flame?
So we don't view twin flame under any point of attention, but I wish to give you my personal perspective on that, because this is such a common DM for me. Like, what do you think on twin flame? Like, I don't know about twin flame, but let me tell you something. The majority of people relate to a twin flame as a best friend. So they are people that they are extremely similar to one another. So perhaps they are two leaders or two providers. So they go along very well to one another.
Mm-hmm.
But that is more a relationship based on best friends. So they are best friends. The first 2-3 years in honeymoon phase, which is an illusion, they feel their love is amazing. Eventually, after 3 years, because they both point of attention of the same things, they both leaders, they can complement each other. They don't need each other. So they're best friends, but they're not actually partner. In a partnership relationship, a person implements something that the other doesn't have. So perhaps my partner gives me something that I don't have, and I give my partner something that she doesn't have. So this is the most successful form of relationship, Mac. The twin flame experience is more like what people consider that. They go so along with their partner because they're so similar, but they're mostly best friends.
Mm-hmm. So they basically burn out. They will have some.
They don't burn out, but eventually relationship to work to its best, one person must move from one, let's say, from one point of attention. The other person can implement this person, but generally the relationship works best. One works in front, like as the leader, as the provider, moving forward to one direction. The other one look after the household, the children. That's more of a feminine energy. So they implement each other under two different points of attention, and they support each other's needs. This is the relationship who works best. So the one that you go along the most is actually your best friend. The one that you probably fight the most is actually the one that could be your good partner. Yeah.
So would you say that in the first few years of a relationship, you are in that opposition, right? Kind of like smoothing the edges, working on yourself, working in the relationship, and then there is some peace at last? Or is this something that will happen throughout your whole life in a relationship?
A relationship, Mac, is a work in progress. It's a symphony that every day says, I choose you. I choose you. I choose you. Out of everybody else, I choose you. So when I choose a person, to a part of my soul, I also become guilty. Why is that? Because I exclude everybody else. So a relationship is a work in progress. Eventually, the first 2-3 years, they are the one that they set the tone for the relationship, how it's going to look like. They are what we call the honeymoon phase, is an illusion. You see the other person as you want him or her to be, not as she or he is. As you want him or her to be, not as she is. But in those 2-3 years, if you do the more work that you can do on each other, and then the better is going to be when the honeymoon phase is actually fading away. So after the first 3 years, you are able to actually, we set the tone, we set the solid basement. I am the feminine in this, and I'm the provider in this relationship. I'm the one looking after the children, the household, and other dynamics. So perhaps we start to implement one another, and we become a oneness. Okay, so we become a oneness, and then we move forward. Eventually, if we both want to be the provider, that's again the best friends relationship. And generally speaking, after the honeymoon phase, our way does like this. A relationship, Mac, to work to its best works like that. So the more myself and my partner enter to one another, and the more I renounce to my femininity, and the more she renounced to her masculinity. So the more we get together, and the more we renounce to one another, to our opposite sexuality. So I renounce to my femininity, the more I bond with my partner, and she renounced to her masculinity, the more she bond with me. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Those are the layer we peel away.
I guess the tricky bit is for that partner, either men or women, to renounce to that, right? I feel like today in society is like only few people are willing to renounce it, right? This very like headbutting.
Very true. Very true. Very true. And there is a reason for that. I renounce to my femininity the more I renounce to my mother's love. The more I renounce to my mother's love, and the more I can actually embrace my father and my masculinity and renounce to my femininity. The more you renounce to your father love, and the more you are able to embody your mother, and the more you are able to actually implement yourself with your new relationship, your new partner, bam, and become one, as I said. But if I don't feel safe to renounce to my mother love, because perhaps I don't feel completely vulnerable and safe with my partner, I remain attached to my mother love and I seek that form of love. So this is how I do not renounce to my femininity.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Okay, I think we're gonna run out of time soon. Is there anything else you would like to add in these relationships, partners, love?
Yes. One important experience which I feel to share, because I believe it's interesting for everybody. It's the ghosting dynamic, which is very big. I thought to bring it up because it's very big these days, and many people ask questions about it. Ghosting, guys, it is an individual who is not capable to take responsibilities. Generally speaking, it comes from men when they are distant from their father, and it comes from women when they are distant from their mother. So generally, a person who is not capable to show up and say, hey, I'm not interested in you or whatever, they don't want to pay, first of all, a little amount of guilt. They want to maintain innocence. But second of all, they generally avoid to take responsibilities. Okay. The same things, guys, is when someone says, I prefer to be single. I want to be single. Of course you do, because when you are single, you are absent of responsibilities. You are what we call Peter Pan, who lives in the island who doesn't exist because he's absent of responsibilities. So of course, somebody will tell you, I like to be single. That's somebody who actually telling you, I like to avoid taking responsibilities.
Very good. So interesting. I feel like we could do another 10 episodes.
I felt to share this because I know it is important.
Yeah, especially nowadays with the whole
yeah.
online dating and messaging and this and that.
That's right. It is easy to change swipe someone else and don't take responsibility to heal what needs to be healed, to face what needs to be faced, and particularly from your parents.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Tizi, for being on the podcast today, our first ever guest. I feel like we have so much out of this episode. Maybe in the future we'll do another one, because I feel like it's such a topic that keeps reoccurring, and everyone loves to listen to this, have better relationships.
Anytime, I'm always happy. I know I'm chatty. I like to
Same thing. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Be back your way.
Thank you everybody for listening this far. If you would like to get in touch with Tiziano or book a session with him, please follow him on social media at Tiziano_Sguerso. That spells TIZIANO_SGUERSO. He does a lot of social media content on this topic and many other topics, and you can find all his information to connect with him, book a session, attend his events. He's fantastic. I very much so recommend him. So yeah, thank you. See you on the next episode.